Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Not Your Mama's Midlife, where we believe that midlife is not a crisis, it's actually an awakening. Hi, I'm Tasha Davis, nurse practitioner and owner of Downtown Hydration and Wellness in Aiken, South Carolina. Well, and coming soon to North Augusta, South Carolina. So let's get into today's topic. I absolutely love this topic. I talk about it daily in my clinic. And it is the lovely transition and awakening of ADHD. Okay. So I have been very transparent with you guys. I am 8 up with ADHD. And it did not come from like a childhood diagnosis. Like so many of you, I went through my entire childhood and then I get to my 40s and I'm in perimenopause and I am looking at myself going, this ADHD is off the chain. Where did it come from? How did it get here? And how do I make it stop? And so I want to talk about what's going on, how we can kind of use it to our advantage. And yeah, just hopefully just kind of like set your mind at ease that there's a reason that these ADHD symptoms are kind of off the chain right now. So let's get into it. First things first, we're going to take it back to hormones. Estrogen, especially, estrogen directly affects dopamine in the brain. Okay. Dopamine in the brain is what we are kind of always like, we're wanting to chase, right? If you are someone with ADHD, our dopamine levels tend to be a little bit on the lower side. So our bodies are like, we're chasing the dopamine. We're chasing it. We want that dopamine hit. And so that can show up, a lot of different ways for people to get that dopamine hit. And we'll talk about some ways what that can look like for some people. But what happens during perimenopause is, as we've said before, the hormones are hormoning. The fluctuations are real. We're up and we're down and we're up and we're down. And that fluctuation of estrogen actually amplifies ADHD. So perimenopause doesn't cause ADHD, it just reveals it, right? It's like it's always been there, but that estrogen was good enough, was high enough that it kind of masked those symptoms. And then we kind of take those dips and then it's like they're no longer masked. It's like here we are, loud and clear, flashing lights, whatever you want to say. But that's what our ADHD it feels like once we get in perimenopause, if we are not well managed. If you're like me, you weren't well managed because you didn't know you had it. You didn't realize it. You didn't fit into that box as a child. Typically, I know for me personally, when I think about ADHD in children, I usually tend to think of like the rambunctious child in the class, maybe some behavior issues, just kind of very disruptive, unable to sit still. And for a lot of kids, especially females, that is absolutely not how ADHD, shows up. And so for a lot of us, a big, symptom of ADHD is just being super high functioning. Like we're just very high achievers. Why is that? Because we're chasing that dopamine. That goal is just check and we love it. So again, ADHD, is not caused by perimenopause. But those hormone fluctuations is when, we kind of are like, oh, there it is, right? Or, if you were someone who was diagnosed earlier on in life, as a child or in your 20s or early 30s, prior to any real hormone issues, you could find that those symptoms are worse again. And however you were, managing it, whether it be with medications or not, those methods are a little more ineffective now. And so, what can ADHD look like when you are in perimenopause? So, I would say one of the major things that I hear is brain fog. So we're like trying to see through cobwebs. It's like we are trying our best to get these thoughts to kind of go together, but we are struggling, right? So brain fog can definitely be, a major sign of that or symptom of that ADHD during those hormone fluctuations. Another big one is motivation. So maybe you're experiencing just a total lack of motivation. Like, I know I got to do it, but I don't want to do it. Like, I am not motivated at all. However, if you are like me, I do not lack motivation. That is one thing that is not lacking. I do not have that symptom of ADHD. However, I do experience difficulty with my follow through. So I am highly motivated, but then about halfway through, I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to finish the task. So, for example, I love painting. Correction. Let me keep it real. I love starting to paint. Okay. So, with opening in the new office in North Augusta, like I want to have, completely, paint everything inside. And so I'm like, oh yes, I can't wait to paint. I love going and picking the paint colors. I love buying fresh brushes. Hello, where are my at a glance planners? You go and you get all new pens and a new calendar. Okay, that's totally an ADHD thing. But I love going to get all the new stuff. I love setting up. I love starting to paint. And then about 2 hours in, I'm questioning like my life choices. Like, why did I ever start this project? Because I literally do not want to do it anymore. Why? Because that dopamine is not there. It was there and now it's not. So now I need to find something else to get that dopamine hit. Right. And so, same thing with like cleaning out your closet, right? Or purging your clothes, kind of going through everything. And then about halfway through, you look around, you're like, just burn it. Can we please just like throw it in the outside in the front yard and set it on fire? Because I would much rather do that and start over than to actually complete this task. Because watching the fire burn would actually give me a dopamine hit right now. So that is what I personally like. It's not the motivation, totally motivated. My follow through, not there. That's where I struggle. We can another symptom could be just fatigue. Like, we're just constantly fatigued. Why? It's because we're always like trying to think, trying to do, trying to, this, that, and the other. And we're just like, our brain is just overloaded. And so when our brain is tired, like, we become tired. But the last thing I want to mention, and I may actually do an entire episode about this because I don't feel like we talk about it enough. And it's a very real symptom that a lot of ADHDers like myself experience, and that is trouble with emotional regulation. So we know during, estrogen, with it fluctuating and our hormones fluctuating, we can be more irritable, we can be more moody. And if you are someone who has ADHD, those mood swings can just really just be amplified, right? You can be moody or you can be moody. And so it just hits a lot harder for those of us with ADHD, especially when we start getting into rejection sensitivity. And so I don't know if you've ever heard that term before, but if you are an ADHDer, you may have experienced it without knowing what the term is. So let's talk about it. Rejection sensitivity is when you experience this overwhelming feeling of rejection and you just internalize it and feel it so, so, so deeply. It's almost crippling, right? It just takes you over. And it doesn't even have to be over something, some dramatic situation. So just say, for instance, you have a job and your group or your coworkers, you guys are working on a project. Everyone throws out ideas about, the next project or how to solve a problem. And collectively as a group, or maybe your supervisor decides they're going to go with this person's idea. Not that your idea was wrong, not that your idea was bad, but for some reason, like, this idea fit a little better, but you internalize it as something very personal, right? You take it to heart, like it cuts you to your core, that you feel rejected. So it's not just at surface level, "Oh, I think this will work better for me." It's actually like rejection, and you feel it very, very deeply. It could be within your friend group. Maybe you get a last minute invite to dinner. And they're like, "Oh my gosh, totally forgot to tell you. I was supposed to tell you last week, but we're doing, dinner at this restaurant tonight, tomorrow night. So sorry. Can you make it?" Well, instead of just thinking to yourself, benefit of the doubt, at the surface, okay, sure, everyone's got a lot going on. Yeah, I can make it. No, I can't. You internalize it as they really didn't want you there. And it was, you're an afterthought and you're just hurt very, very deeply. You feel it very, very deeply. The same as with partners. So that can definitely play into situations with your partner if you are, suffering from that rejection sensitivity, where your partner may be like, "Oh, it's not a big deal. I forgot that we were supposed to go to this function." You feel it like, "You don't prioritize me. You don't do that." And I mean, maybe they don't, maybe that's been an issue before, but that's another story. But when you have rejection sensitivity, like even just things that aren't or shouldn't be deeply wounding you, it really, really cuts deep. And so, like I said, we may talk about some more about that at a later date, because I do think it's worth talking about and diving deeper into it. But so when you are an ADHD person, you may find that, just say maybe you were diagnosed earlier in life, maybe in your childhood, adolescence, teens, 20s, before like real hormone issues, right? And perimenopause. And maybe you are now in perimenopause and you're like, "I was well managed before, like the medication's just not working for me anymore." That is a very real thing and that can happen. But it often goes, for a lot of us, misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, just because our symptoms and our signs of ADHD look different than like what most people think of, right? Is normal ADHD. And, ADHD is one of those things where personally, I feel like it's an actual superpower. So I love that I have ADHD. I kind of figured and I knew, that I had ADHD. I wasn't officially diagnosed until like my 40s. But then once I was diagnosed, I kind of could look back over my childhood and it's like, "Oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. Oh, there it is again." But for a lot of us, we weren't diagnosed in childhood and, we just kind of made do, and for me, it was just that high functioning, right? That, goal crushing, that constantly needing to achieve, that was my ADHD. And so I'm thankful for my ADHD because I've been able to accomplish my dreams and my goals. And so I do not see it as a disability at all. I feel very fortunate that I have ADHD, because I was able to get everything done that I needed to get done. So I was, momming, I was wifing, I was doing the home, I was working full time. I was also in school full time and doing clinicals all at one time. And it was just total chaos. And that was great, right? I thrive in chaos. Because why? Because the dopamine. I'm getting the dopamine hit, right? It's just constant chaos. I'm firing on all pistons. But then what happened is I get done with nurse practitioner school. I'm working, things are kind of calming down a little bit. And then I start a position where I am practicing telehealth. So telehealth is like me and it's the computer and the patient's on the screen. So it's just this right here. And I thought it was going to kill me. It was so challenging and difficult. And really, I just felt like my mental health was like, plummeting significantly because it was so hard. And, for someone who has been a high achiever because of my ADHD, and now I'm kind of feeling like I'm not really high achieving and I'm like kind of working on the bare ass minimum over here, because it was so difficult. I was, I wasn't handling that and coping with that very well. So that is when I got my diagnosis and spoke with my provider, and we worked together on a treatment plan that would work for me. So if that's something that you're experiencing, highly recommend have that conversation with your medical provider to get on a good plan, because there are options out there for sure. I do want to transition a little bit into, I mentioned earlier that we are designed to kind of chase that dopamine. And what does that look like? So for some people, they get that dopamine hit with, exercising, right? We've heard of like the, gym rat term, whatever you want, gym junkie, whatever you want to call it. And they kind of get that, they love it, right? And I always thought that that was just kind of a weird thing, until I started running and experienced my first runner's high. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's totally a thing. I totally, I thought it was a little woo woo. I'm not going to lie, but it is totally a thing. But because you get that dopamine hit and it's just so euphoric, right? It's so euphoric when you're just like, this was a goal, I crushed it. My body is just like releasing all of this stuff because the dopamine is just like, it's there. Okay. And so for some people it's exercising, it's running. For some people, it's a different type of hobby, but for a lot of people, it's actually in the form of alcohol. So I do want to spend some time and talk about alcohol intake and the ADHD brain. So why do a lot of ADHDers kind of want that alcohol at the end of the day? Okay, well, that's because alcohol temporarily increases that dopamine release. And I say temporarily, right? Temporarily we get that okay, relaxation. Another reason is our nervous system with having ADHD is just like, we're ready, we're ready, we're ready. And when we are able to just kind of like get that dopamine hit, it's almost like our body kind of relaxes into it and our nervous system kind of calms down a little bit. It also can temporarily calm down, like if you're one, you got a lot of noise in your head, right? You just got a lot of stuff going on up here. Could be going through a hard time, like within your personal life, stressors going on. And that alcohol, when it hits that dopamine and we have that release, that can kind of quiet the noise in the brain. And for a lot of us ADHDers, we crave that. We crave that quiet in the brain for just a minute. And when we have that mental quiet, it's just like, we want more of that, right? We definitely want more of that. But the problem is that once we are in perimenopause, those dopamine receptors start getting less responsive. So what does that mean? So if the dopamine receptors during perimenopause are less responsive, then that means we're going to require more alcohol to get that same effect that we used to. So if you are someone who would go out to dinner and you would typically have you are a 1 glass of wine or 1 cocktail, or maybe you were a 2 glass of wine with apps and dinner and dessert and, after dinner, whatever, but you are now in perimenopause and now you're noticing that to get that feeling, that relaxation, like maybe you need more. Okay. And so in order to get that calming effect, it's requiring more alcohol intake. Okay. So that then becomes, obviously more of an issue, because for several reasons, because then we start, ADHDers, for some ADHD people, there is a component of addiction that is there. And so if you're someone who's just like, I just need that mental quiet, and alcohol gives that to you, but then you have to do more, and then you have to do more, then that is a very, very slippery slope. However, more, more prominent, that happens is when we have that alcohol intake. It actually sets us up. So even though temporarily we get that dopamine release and we calm down, what happens when we try to go to bed? What happens when we try to go to sleep? It actually, that alcohol prevents us from really getting that good quality sleep. So what was like giving you that calm when you first had the drink now is actually, we're actually like self-sabotaging ourselves when it comes to actually good quality restful sleep at night. And if you are an ADHD and you have had a bad night's sleep, you know what that is going to look like the next day. So more alcohol equals worse sleep, which then in turn results in worse ADHD symptoms. So the brain fog is going to be worse. The mental clarity is going to be worse. The fatigue is going to be worse. That emotional dysregulation is going to be worse. So all of those like emotional, you're going to be more emotional about everything and feel it, deeply. And so for a lot of people, and there are a lot of patients that I speak with, they have used alcohol as a way to kind of get that mental quiet that we need to get that temporary dopamine release. But then the reality of it is that we are actually self-sabotaging when we do that, because what our body needs is actual rest, right? We need actual sleep. And so that alcohol is preventing us from actually getting what we need, what our bodies need. So what are some other options? So one good option, not everyone, this will not be for everyone. I will, full disclosure, take what works and, leave what doesn't. So morning light. So if you are someone who gets up early, just getting in that sunlight, that morning light is actually like a really good, calming, just kind of set the tone of the day. So that would be something that is kind of easy to do for some people, or if you're just like totally anti-morning person, then maybe not so much. But another thing is making sure we are getting in enough protein. Okay, so we want to make sure that we're hitting like our protein goals. If you're unsure what your protein goal should be, definitely talk to your provider for some guidance on that. But protein, exercise. So again, we don't have to be, I'm an ADHDer, so I'm going to go to the extreme. So if I do an exercise program, I have to really try hard not to just like, go in too hard, because, I'll lock in a minute and it's just me and I'm just gonna, slay the dragon. I'm gonna get it done. I'm gonna be all or nothing. And so I have to teach myself that, there's a process, and not to just go so hard with every single thing. But exercise is a good way to kind of get that dopamine hit naturally, and it has positive effects, right? For some people, it's breath work. So we hold a lot of tension like up here, right? We don't really tend to take like a whole lot of breaths, but there is a lot to be said for doing breath work and breathing exercises. I think there's like tons of different apps you can get on there to kind of teach yourself how to do it, but that can give you that mental quiet and calm that brain. One thing that I love, love, love is magnesium. So I take magnesium glycinate every single night. On tough days and emotional days, I will even, have, I think I've even mentioned before, a magnesium Epsom salt, bath at night, just to kind of let go of that stress, just to kind of naturally tell my body it's okay. We can relax. We're not in danger. We are not needing to be stressed out. The mind can relax a little bit. Do some breathing exercises while you're soaking. Another activity that would be great is yoga. I would say if you are looking to help with like the quiet of the brain. I would do, nothing like super, super, super intense, just, like a slow yoga program would be good. Again, warm baths, hot showers, that can kind of relax everything, bring it down naturally. I personally have not done this. I'm considering it. It's on my list to try, but weighted blankets. For some people, weighted blankets just kind of help at the end of the day, just to kind of relieve that stress. Red light therapy, same thing. I love red light therapy. If you've been to see me, I love some red light therapy. It has so many benefits, but I love it for mood and just like mental, just quiet, right? It's just very restorative for me. So when we are thinking about coping mechanisms to help during, perimenopause with those ADHD symptoms, there are many options. Medications are an option. That's something to definitely discuss with your medical provider to see, if you're a good candidate for. There's all different ones. There's ones with stimulants and some not, and so just kind of working with your provider on a good path of just kind of honing in on that. The main thing about with the alcohol, I want to kind of circle back to that, is when we're thinking about these alcohol versus all of these other potential coping mechanisms that we talked about at night before bed. What I like you to do is think like this is our goal. We want earlier relaxation and not late night sedation. So there's a difference. So we want earlier relaxation. We want to build into that relaxed state so that our body naturally kind of gets that good rest. We don't want to be sedated, right? Because when we do, last minute sedation, we're just, drinking a glass or two of wine at night right before bed. We're not going to allow our bodies to kind of really rest and recover for the next day. So we're going to wake up the next morning, feeling like total garbage, right? We're going to, have a headache or cotton mouth, or, we're going to just feel real fatigued, the brain fog. So all of those things that we are trying to avoid feeling, we're actually making it worse when we get into a point of using alcohol as a coping mechanism. So I hope the takeaway from this is that you understand that like ADHD, it's not that your brain is just broken, right? We don't get to perimenopause and it's like our brain doesn't work anymore. No, it absolutely works. It just has like a new operating system. So we have to figure out what works now, right? For some people, it actually is, hormone replacement. And so, like we had said in the beginning, that estrogen is definitely affecting that dopamine. So if you are someone who's having like these massive swings of estrogen, or if it's getting way too low, then maybe some hormone replacement of balancing out the estrogen and progesterone would actually help balance out your symptoms of your ADHD. That's definitely something, again, you want to speak to your provider about to see if that is maybe an option. So maybe you don't want to take ADHD meds, but you do feel like you need some help and some support there. Highly recommend just being open, being honest with your provider, letting them know kind of where you're at, where you're struggling, and what your goals are. And so, anyway, I hope again that you enjoyed this conversation about ADHD and perimenopause. Again, perimenopause does not cause ADHD. It just unmasks it, right? And that's what midlife's all about. We're just unmasking it. Knowledge is power. We are loving the ADHD as long as we kind of steer it in the right direction. We use it for good, not evil. I hope that this is kind of like shed a little bit of light on that for you. So if you are someone who is in midlife, you're going through perimenopause, and you feel like your ADHD is ADHDing a little too much for you right now, and you're local to Aiken, or North Augusta, you can definitely reach out to us here. We will be happy to kind of guide you on a good path forward, to get you some mental clarity, to get you some good sleep, because that is important. But I may, like I said, I may go back and we may circle back on the emotional dysregulation, because I think it's important to just kind of say the thing like we always do. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. If you have any questions, concerns, or ideas you would like us to cover on the podcast, you know where to find us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And we will see you next time. Bye.